Welcome back. I'm back again with some more tips on getting started with your research. Let's recap what we've talked about so far. So we've actually went through several steps when you're getting started. So step one, you start with yourself and you work your way backwards. You start with the known and you work to the unknown. Step number two, you want to write down information you know about yourself and your family. You want to include names, dates, places, events, places of residence, any type of occupations, military, church affiliation, family stories, family traditions. Any of this type of information can give great clues to researching your family history. Step three is you want to look around the home, and we talked about several different sources you can find, such as diaries, journals, family Bibles, obituaries, memorial cards, birth announcements, marriage announcements. You may find a program from a wedding you attended of a family member, graduation announcement. You may have yearbooks or church directories. You may have a little black address book around that has all kinds of information, or you may have some personal letters that include some information. You can also look at possibly military records may be found in the home, as well as heirlooms. Heirlooms can have a story to tell too. So you may actually recall some type of stories affiliated with special item that's been handed down through the family. So all that's important to actually record. I've also talked about reaching out and contacting known relatives to see what information they have on their family or what they can help out with your own family. And I did mention that if you are one of the older ones of your family and you don't have any living relatives around to communicate with at this point, I'm going to leave it up to you to leave your legacy for your kids, for your grandkids, for any nieces or nephews. So go ahead and begin recording some of those stories. You can do it in a bullet list, you can do it in narrative form, whatever means that you're comfortable with. You can do it pen and pencil or your computer. You do what's best for you and just record those stories, because once you're gone, those memories are going to be gone with you. So after you gather all that information, you need to organize the information. And we've talked about a family group sheet, we've talked about an ancestor chart, and how important it is to actually fill those out and have them completed and actually continue to update them as you get more and more information. There's nothing more frustrating than you get done with the research and you don't bother updating your records for several months down the road, and then you're ready maybe cold and then you cannot remember what you're actually doing. So it's best practice is to actually do a little bit of research and then update your files at that point. Whether it is in paper format, whether you have it on a computer in some way, or online through Family Search or Ancestry or MyHeritage, whichever way you have chosen to actually structure your family tree. We've talked about actually evaluating your information, seeing what information you have, what information you're trying to need to try to find, and then based on that information you want to write a research plan where you include an objective of what your research what your research project is. That way you don't go on those little bunny trails going around, which is easy to do as a genealogist. You want to include what information you already know about this particular ancestor that you're researching. You want to maybe look and see, what type of sources you may have that may be available that can help you resolve this problem. And then after you have all that done, then you can take your research plan with you, either to the computer or to a library or where you're going to choose to do research, and begin to search. Remember to keep track of any correspondences you do through a correspondence log. Keep track of any research, both successful and not so successful searches, on a research log. That way you know what you have done so you don't repeat that time and time again. And then as you find more information, once again, update everything to keep it current. Well, if you're doing genealogy for any certain period of time, you are going to come across discrepancies in the records. You're going to come across maybe misleading information, some obstacles. Sometimes we call this a genealogy brick wall, where you have to think outside the box to try to overcome these problems. And it could be, a lot of times it may be as simple as your ancestor moved from the one place where you thought they were to someplace else. For example, within my own family, my grandmother always thought her folks had always lived in Marietta area, Washington County area. Looking through the records, I've actually found them over in Warren County, Ohio, which is in southwestern Ohio. I found them in Noble County, as well as Monroe County and Washington County. Monroe, Noble, and Washington are all on the southeastern part of Ohio. I also had a researcher in at the library several years ago. She knew for sure that her people they were born and raised and died all in Holmes County. And she couldn't find their death there, they couldn't find a burial there or anything, only to find out that they had actually relocated to another state. I believe it may have been Iowa. Back in the 1800s, early 1900s, a lot of times the older parents would go live with their kids, and they may take turns. So they may have even been mobile in their older age, as they cannot keep up with the homestead or the farm anymore, so they're actually going to live with their kids, and they may be with their kids if they're having grandkids to help out with the kids at that time. So although you may think that your ancestor maybe stayed put, there's a good possibility that they were very mobile. It just took them longer to get from point A to point B than what it does today. But think outside the box. If you're having problems locating them where you think they should be, think outside the box and consider that they may have actually relocated either to another county or to another state or even to a different township. You also want to be careful when you're using Ancestry and Family Search. A lot of times in most cases they've indexed a lot of the records, or they've abstracted a lot of the records, and you don't know who has actually been abstracting or indexing. So you're going to find spelling errors. And sometimes, we've had people come to our department, they say, well, my name's always been spelled this way with an E, and this other name that that can't be mine because it's spelled with an I. Well, and they wonder why they can't break through the brick wall. It's because in genealogy and the earlier records, those recording the records were not spelling bee champs, okay? They may have had a 3rd grade education, maybe a little bit more, so they would actually spell the names how it sounded to them. So, if you have the surname Wayne, they may spell W-A-Y-N-E, or they may spell W-A-N-E, or they may spell W-A-I-N, and they could be all the same family, the same individual. It just depends on the enumerator who had recorded the information and how he thought the name should have been spelled. Likewise, for the different places, if they were not familiar with the place, a lot of times they really butchered the spelling of that place. And these could actually lead you astray, or it may just sort of throw you for a loop when you're actually using those indexes and the abstracts through Ancestry, Family Search, and some of the other databases. If you do find one that may be a possibility, I really encourage you to see if there's a digital image connected to it. Even if you don't think it's a possibility, at all times try to find a derivative or some type of like a scanned image of it or the original copy of it, so you can actually read the handwriting yourself. If you have any experience at all in reading the older handwriting, you will know how easy it is to misinterpret those letters. I's and E's are often mixed up, A's and O's are mixed up, U's and V's are mixed up, L's and S's, capital L's and capital S's are mixed up quite often, T's and F's are mixed up, I's and T's can even be mixed up. And L's, because sometimes they'll cross an L and dot a T. So you have to be careful of other records. So don't let those actually lead you astray, or don't think that that's your ancestor because it just felt differently and you don't recognize the place or anything like that. Go ahead and take a look at the record and judge it for yourself. You also have to keep in mind that these surnames may have been spelled differently. On my mom's side, we descend from the McElwain family. It was once originally spelled M-U-C-K-L-E-W-A-I-N. It's also been spelled M-U-C-K-E-L-V-A-I-N. It's been spelled M-C-E-L-W-A-I-N. And my 3rd great-grandfather actually shortened it down to just Wayne, W-A-Y-N-E. They're all part of the same family, but that is just one example of how the surname may have changed over the years. You may find that, especially during the World War I, World War II period, for the German immigrants here to this country, they may want to anglicize their name where it didn't have much of a German sound. There are times that they may have been, people would have been a little bit prejudiced towards them, being they're German, given that the States would have been involved with the war effort. The same thing with the Irish or some of the Italians. Sometimes they change their name depending on what's going on in the world at that point. You also want to keep in mind that people may use their first name, they may use their middle name, they may use initials, they may use nicknames. So if you have someone such as a Mary Elizabeth, a common nickname for Mary is Polly. You may find her underneath Mary, you may find her underneath Elizabeth, you may find her underneath Polly, you may find her underneath Eliza. You may find Mary as Mariah if there's some type of German ancestry there. So you really have to keep an open mind. Sometimes I've even found them as M-E or E-M, which means Elizabeth Mary or Mary Elizabeth, depending on how they may have the name spelled. So keep that in the back of your mind as you're going through records and if you have problems trying to find the information. If you find too much, if you go from your ancestor, going from one census to another census, and you have like 5 or 6 different documents that have different birth years or different birthplaces, you may want to use a comparison and contrast chart. Sometimes this helps out. And you want to sort of evaluate the document that you received the information from, which is why it's so very important for you to cite your sources, because if you do not know where you got the information from, you cannot actually weigh in to see is this a more reliable source than this other one. For example, if you have a family Bible that has the entries in different inks and different scripts, that's going to probably hold more weight than just a compiled genealogy you find on Ancestry or Family Search that has no documentation at all. Or a death certificate may have a little more weight than a tombstone, for example. Because sometimes tombstones were erected much later after the death, especially if the family did not have any money to actually pay for a tombstone. One fine example within my own family, my grandmother had 2 older twin siblings. Their name was Homer and Lucille Reed, and they did not have a tombstone. So later in life, my grandmother erected a tombstone for them. And she always believed that they were both born and they both died December of 1919. So that's what she put on the tombstone inscription. And this would have been many, many decades after they actually passed away. Well, the records reveal, I was able to find an actual birth certificate for Lucille, and she actually died shortly after birth. Well, Homer was still living in the 1920 census, and that was taken in January 1920. So the month and the year on the tombstone that my mom had erected, that my grandmother had erected, was actually incorrect. And you're going to find this occasionally on tombstones. I mean, they try their best to get them accurate, but you could have an error in the person giving the information, or it could be even the inscriber of the tombstone may have misread the information and included the wrong date. Not to mention that if the tombstone is weathered quite a bit, or it has some damage, it may be more challenging to read it. So some people may think that a number 4 is actually a number 1, or that a number 8 is actually a number 3, just because it's weathered a little bit. So the tombstone inscription books may lead you astray a little bit with that. So you do want to try to check the sources, check various sources, and compare and contrast that information. If you're working with immigrants, you have to have an understanding about what may have taken place in their home country, because if they're out from like the Alsace-Lorraine area, there's a good possibility that they may list their birthplace as France, as Germany, or as Switzerland, depending on what was going on. It also depends on how the census taker may have asked a question. If you were asked a question, well, where are you from, versus where were you born, that could be 2 completely different answers. So keep that in mind. So you may want to even look, when you're looking at census records, go on the National Archives website and see what kind of questions a census taker actually had to ask, and see how it's been worded, and that may have an impact in terms of how the response was. Also with the census takers, you don't even know for sure who is giving the information. The only census that indicates who's giving the information is the 1940 U.S. Census, and we'll talk more about this when I do a talk just on U.S. Census records. So just keep in mind, you have to look at the documents as a whole, understand the document, see why it was actually designed, and see if there's any reasons why people may have lied on it, or they may have just been misinformed. So another way to resolve a conflict is to actually create a timeline. And timelines can actually give you some insight into your family as well. You want to include some national events as well as some state events and maybe some local events to know what's going on. Because you may end up finding a family that maybe in 1849, they seem to all disappear. You had record of them before, and then you only find maybe 1 or 2 of the family members surviving listed in the 1850 census or in some other documents. And that is because there was a cholera epidemic going on. And cholera epidemic, diphtheria, some of those epidemics, they could have easily wiped out families, leaving maybe 1 or 2 survivors if they're fortunate. So you want to know what's going on. If you work with immigration there's wartime here in the States during the Civil War, you wouldn't have had very many immigrants coming in. They didn't want to come to a war-ravaged nation. So it's very important to know what's going on, and you can include this within your timeline. The timeline can also indicate if there's a problem. If you end up going through the timeline, and this can be created either manually or through software programs such as Roots Magic or Legacy or through Ancestry, they do include a timeline. You're going to notice that something that seems to be a little bit off. I mean, if you have someone like a 60-year-old female giving birth to a newborn when she's 60 years old, something's not quite right. And you may not pick that up unless you're doing the timeline. So the timeline can actually pull out different information that may show that there's a problem. Or you may find that someone is actually married before they're even born. Now, I mean, there are such things as prearranged marriages, but I don't think that's the case in this particular incident that I've actually seen this in. And sometimes you may find some of these compiled genealogies that the people are dying before they're even born. You may find individuals who are serving in the military at age 7 and 8 years old, which is very highly unlikely. So the timeline can help point out these issues as well. So you can do the comparison and contrast chart, you can do a timeline, or I also encourage you to write up an actual narrative. It could be a bullet list, it could be as simple as that, or you could actually write a narrative. Anytime we are helping researchers in our department here, we usually send out a letter or an email summarizing what we have found. And usually, the majority of the time, as we're composing that email or composing that letter, we realize that we forgot to check this source, or this source, or we're seeing that this doesn't quite make sense, so we have to go back and revisit. So when you actually are forced to sit down and write about the problem or about your ancestor, then you actually can tell if there's some type of problems that may be arising within that. So I really encourage you to write narratives as you're going through and doing the research. Like I said, it can be in a full-blown paragraph form, it could be a bullet list, it could be just, jotting down some notes, something as simple as that. But you want to try to, as you write it out, you can help understand what may be going on. If all else fails, if you don't know where to go, you try the comparison and contrast chart, you try the timeline, you try to write a narrative, and you just don't know where to go, that's where you visit. You can visit our library here. We actually we are fully staffed. We have 3 full-time employees that work in our department. Christina, myself, as well as Elaine. Elaine sometimes works out shelving books, so sometimes she's in and out. But if you just don't know where to go, or if you're stuck or you're trying to get started, feel free to come in and visit us. We're there to help you try to go to the next step. The other option may be to join a local genealogical society. They're usually fairly reasonable to join. They meet usually on a monthly or quarterly basis, and this is a great opportunity for you to network and actually talk with fellow genealogists about your certain problems, almost like a support group if you want to think of it that way. So they can actually help out. But the societies also offer a lot of excellent programs, and you can use this as a training tool. I've been a full-time genealogy librarian for 21 years. I graduated back in '98 from graduate school, but I've never finished going to school. I'm constantly going to institutes, I'm going to webinars, attending webinars, I'm visiting state conferences, national conferences, reading different literature. So I'm all the time learning, and that's how you're going to learn genealogy and how to learn the ropes, is to actually continue to educate yourself. Whether it's self-education or attending seminars or actually viewing these webinars like we're doing here, etc. So I really want to encourage you to do that. Then finally, you want to share your findings with others. And you can do this in many formats. If you don't have anyone to share within your family, you may want to donate something to your local genealogical, historical, or public library society. If you have Ohio roots, you may want to donate some of your family charts and some of your work down to Ohio Genealogical Society. That way other people who come through can actually see your work, and they may be able to make contact if you have some of the contact information added there, and then you can actually collaborate and work together to resolve some other problems. You could also write a brief narrative or a brief article about your ancestor in a local society newsletter or in a state newsletter. They're all the time looking for contributions, and this is a way, even if you don't have all the answers, or this is a way for you to get your story out. And a lot of people read these different case studies, these different articles, and you never know who you may find through writing an article and submitting it for publication. Or you may just want to share it through your own website. You may want to share it through Ancestry or MyHeritage or some of the other paid websites. You may want to share it through Family Search. When you are sharing your findings with others, use some common sense when you do that, okay? Do not include private information out there on the web or, for people to get a hold of unless you have their written consent. There's nothing more aggravating than actually having someone give some research or some information, and they're expecting it to be confidential, and then that person ends up posting it up live on Ancestry, and it's all over, and that causes a lot of disarray within the family. So if someone has actually requested you to keep the stuff private, please do so. If you have something within your family that may be a little bit controversial, that may create bad feelings or ill will within the family, use caution. Do not share that stuff at all. You can actually keep a separate file for your own records. Just don't share it with others, especially if they've asked you not to, or if it's a very confidential or a very touching story or event that took place within the lives of their ancestors or relatives. So just be careful with that. Do not share like Social Security numbers. You may not want to share necessarily your mom's maiden name so much out there on the web. Just use common sense when you're actually sharing that information. As you're doing research, you're going to discover that you have to look at the bigger picture. And a lot of people in genealogy, they get so focused on the names, dates, and places that they forget to look outside the box a little bit and understand what's going on. When I was talking earlier about having immigrants and knowing what's going on in their home country, that is one example, or knowing what epidemics may be going on, or knowing what recessions may have been taking place within the community that your ancestor lived in. These are all important things. You also may want to understand a little bit of the law at the time. Was it legal for a girl to get married at age 14 with just a parental consent in the state, or did she have to wait till she's 18? Here in Ohio, usually to get married without parental consent early on, the female had to be 18 and the male had to be 21. These are important things that you need to understand in terms of basic law at the time that your ancestors lived here. That will help out. You also need to learn the history. You also need to learn geography. When you're doing research, most records here in the United States are kept at the county level, and so you need to have an idea about the history of that county. Here in Wayne County, we were actually formed out of the Northwest Territory, but we had Holmes County formed out of the southern part of Wayne County, and we had Ashland County formed out of the western part of Wayne County. If you're trying to look for records in Ashland County before 1846, when they were officially formed, you're going to have to either go to Wayne County if they're over in the eastern part of Ashland County, which is now Ashland County, or Richland County if they're over in what's now the western part of Ashland County, or even in the northern part, you may have to go to Medina or Huron County, because Ashland was formed out of those 4 counties. So you have to know, most records are kept at the parent level, at the parent county level. So you actually almost become a geographer as well as a lawyer. You have to understand economics, you have to know the political climate at the time. You may have to know a little bit of sociology. You have to become acquainted with church. Early on, church was the main hub, that was the main social activity. A lot of times communities would actually create the church first before they actually get the actual houses built. It's very important, and you had multiple purposes. So it's very important to understand maybe what church affiliation your ancestors may have come from, and that can actually lead to other records. So just looking over my notes here for a couple minutes. That's a lot of basics in terms of getting started. Just as a recap, Once again, to summarize, start with yourself, work your way backwards, go from the known to the unknown, write down what information you know, keep organized. Do not be afraid to use correspondence logs, research logs, use a research plan to stay on target. Make sure you document your site and your sources. Contact relatives if they're available. If not, you make sure you leave your legacy for your offspring. Go ahead and begin researching. You could try different websites, and we'll talk about this later on. When you encounter obstacles, think outside the box. Think of spelling. There could be some spelling errors. There could be some abstracting errors, some indexing errors, any of those plus other places. So you want to make sure you evaluate things. Write down what information you do know to help you think through the process. If you're stuck and don't know where to go, contact someone who is more experienced in genealogy, whether through a genealogy society or a public library that has a genealogy librarian or genealogy staff or volunteers to help out. And then share your findings with others, and then don't forget to continue educating yourself about the different records by going through attending webinars, seminars, institutes, conferences, etc. It's all about learning, because the more you learn, the better off you can be as a researcher. So for now, I hope this is helping. This will actually conclude just getting started series. From here, we'll go on to specific record types at a later session. So happy hunting, and once again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Once again, my name is Deb Kitko. My email is dkitko@wcpl.info. Or you can contact our department at 330-262-0916 and just choose the option for genealogy. And thank you, and I actually appreciate your feedback, whether this is very helpful or some other areas that you may want me to expand on. So for now, have fun, enjoy your journey researching your family.